It'll be nice to get a slight reprieve from the SEC Love Fest, but at the same time, ESPN is currently giving Houston some love, Oklahoma State not so much. Both teams have players to pay attention to, and we've got an expert, a real one this time, to help us break it down.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all. Hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. We got a special treat today. We get to talk about the Houston Cougs with a legitimate expert, Parker Ainsworth from Locked On Cougs. How are we feeling today, brother man?
We're good. What's funny, we are good. I hadn't thought about being ranked 11th out of 20 as being a good thing until we started talking.
Well, it's something, right? It's something to mention, just like it's also important to mention everybody out here. Today's show is brought to you today by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially right now when new FanDuel customers can get 150 bones back in bonus bets when your first $5 hauler is a winner. Make sure you go check out FanDuel, and make sure you also go check out Parker. All right, buddy. So let's get to this. Yeah, the tiering system, ironically enough, right, just very recently, EA Sports put Oklahoma State in the Tier 1 status, which is that's where we belong, right? Let's call it spade. But ESPN obviously doesn't view Oklahoma State as favorably, but that tiering for EA Sports was also before we had a disastrous season. But when you're looking at this tiering system, were you surprised where Houston was elevated in this tiering system, or did you think that kind of falls right in line with what the expectations should be in Coug country this season?
So full disclosure, when I first heard of the list, I heard Houston was in the 11th tier out of 20. And I was like, well, if each tier is 10 teams, that sounds ludicrous. They're not quite evenly split up like that. There's
Correct.
more like 2 in this one, 4 in that one, or whatever, which made me feel a little bit better. I probably think of Houston's having more potential than that. But then I saw the schools, they've got Houston in there with North Carolina and the Bill Belichick factor and all those kinds of things. And that felt a little bit better than when I initially heard Houston was 11th out of 20th. And I was like, that's not good. Oklahoma State, though, listen, y'all been in the Power 4 30 years longer than we have. That seems awfully challenging is, I guess, the word I'll toss your way at 14th.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Again, we deserve to have a lot of egg on our face after this previous season. When you have 20 returning starters and almost 90% of your roster, you should kind of be at the forefront of the Big 12 conversation. So when you completely fall flat on your face, I get the reservations in regards to the Cowboys this season. My only difficulty with comprehending all of this, buddy, is it seems like some of this is just people not doing a whole lot of research, right? If you talk to people on the sidelines in Stillwater, or you have the ability to go check out what's happening in Stillwater, it is night and day different. We're doing something from an intensity, physicality perspective that Mike Gundy's never done, right? Mike Gundy's always been kind of in the evolutionary offensive processes, which is keep guys healthy as opposed to just banging heads and running through brick walls. This team is doing the exact opposite. We're going the old school Les Miles route. And I think you need to do that after a 3-win season. You have to be able to run your face mask through a brick wall and chew on some grass occasionally to make a statement. So I'm all for it. I'm all about it. And yes, so you did mention that you guys are up there as in the tier 11, which is classified as the sleeper status. Like these are teams that ESPN designates as the potential to make a run at something. You're also with Colorado, Cincinnati. You mentioned North Carolina with the Belichick factor. The Pitt Panthers, what? Rutgers, okay, maybe, sure. Virginia, it's like, I will admit that out of this list, I do think that Houston might have the best prospects of being successful other than North Carolina. And I'm not saying that because I believe in the Bill Belichick is going to be super successful in college. But if you go look at North Carolina's schedule, buddy, both of us, Houston and Oklahoma State, would win 9 or 10 games with that schedule all day, every day. I swear easily. Oklahoma State would have won 7 games last year with that schedule. Like it's rough. Good for Belichick, good for UNC, but the cast of characters you're with, I do feel like that you guys have the potential to be above most of that crew.
Well, and the Belichick thing feels like it'll snowball whenever those wins start happening, and you mentioned the schedule will help. I don't actually know if he's going to be a good college coach or not. I would point out his last couple of years in New England, they weren't so hot. But I look at really the kind of that tier that they're with, and I'm kind of like him. Like Cincinnati had the college football playoff appearance, but then coaching changes happened. Colorado won a handful of games last year with the Heisman Trophy winner playing both sides of the ball. Virginia, Rutgers is really old. I do feel pretty good about Houston in that area, in that grouping. I will say it's interesting when I go up to a tier 10B, which is 6 teams. That's Liberty, Memphis, James Madison, Toledo, Tulane, UNLV. And like, I do kind of feel a little insulted that we're put solidly below those.
Yeah.
Obviously, we just blew Memphis off as a conference. We just stole Tulane's coach that built that program up. And I don't know. I guess UNLV did beat Houston last year in a head-to-head matchup before their quarterback quit on them for NIL money. But I I think that's where my reservations come from. I will say, sitting squarely between us, though, is the Stars and Stripes Tier 13 that has Air Force, Army, and Navy. And I wouldn't have thought there'd have been a whole lot of Power 4 teams down underneath that, even given that Army had a pretty good year last year.
Yeah. Well, the only, I mean, I disagree with it, right? But I will say, from a preparation standpoint, playing the service academies is always an absolute nightmare because there's nobody else in the conference that's going to run that style of system. So it's really hard to squeeze 3 days, right? Because, you don't do all days in pads. Everybody does a few days of pads, a couple days in pads, then you do the walkthrough, then you get on an airplane, all that fun stuff. So whenever you're playing a service academy, you got to squeeze 3 days of 6 different rushing options into the preparation week. And that's what makes the service academies very difficult because you're not going to play another triple option style of attack ever again all year. So I get it from that angle, but it is very disrespectful. And I've been on the Mike Gundy needs to reconstruct his contract a couple different times bus, right? So I'm not always been the Gundy's the bee's knees when all of your coaching needs come up guy, but this is kind of preposterous. I hate that Utah keeps getting brought up with, they're going to respond because Kyle Whittingham. But it's just like, well, hold on now. The Gundy record is better than Whittingham's. Almost everything's identical. Like Gundy, I think, has one more win, one more bowl win. The winning percentage is almost the same. And the biggest differentiation, yes, they do have a couple Pac-12 titles, and we only have one Big 12 title. I'll give them that. But they also spent most of their lives in the G5. So I don't entirely get it. And before we break down some of the dudes on both of our squads that people need to pay attention to, I did want to hit the Oklahoma State. So our tier 4, you guys are in the sleeper category. We are classified as room for improvement with Arizona, okay. Northwestern, that's embarrassing. UCF, cool, I can get it. There's some Scott Frost allure here. Wake Forest, that's embarrassing. West Virginia, hey, which we're going to talk about in segment 3. I mean, I'm kind of okay with that to some degree, but a lot of these universities historically in the last 20 years don't even hold a candle to Oklahoma State. So the amount of disrespect is perplexing. Again, doubting Oklahoma State after a 3-win season, it should happen. People nationally should doubt us. But to this degree, bro, it's kind of wild. It's kind of wild. What say you?
You could say it's Hoss heinous. Couldn't you? There you go. There you go. I do think that there's some disrespect for Haney there. And I also think that if you just said these 6 teams need to improve this season, I'm like, yeah, Oklahoma State needs to improve this season.
Right.
They frankly have a coach that I'd argue might need to be on a hot seat, given some stuff, like he has 2 new coordinators and you only get Solon to get those things right. I'm not saying that to win the Big 12, they probably need to win more than 4 games or whatever. But being the 14th tier, I think is where that comes in. Because if you just said they need to improve, that makes sense. Is that they're that far below everyone else in this? Because I mentioned who tier 10B is. If you go up to like tier 10A, it's like Wisconsin, Nebraska, USC. Those are like legacy programs from like when we were little kids or younger that aren't really around. Like they have money because they have wealthy donors and whatever, but like they haven't been relevant in a minute. And then tier 9, it's like Virginia Tech, NC State. Like those are teams that are comparable. We're talking about in realignment conversations all the time. In fact, those are schools that we consider Big 12 schools. So I guess like you're saying, it's that like ranking it is. It's not that the qualitative aspect of it's disrespectful. It's the quantitative where they put it that strikes me as an odd spot for Oklahoma State. And I'm not a gigantic Gundy guy. It's not for me to talk to your listeners about because they know a lot more about him. I will say though that like I do think of Oklahoma State as having had good talent come through it, right? And so that's interesting enough to say the least.
Yeah, I think we've done it very, very well. It is nice that we're finally participating in the NIL era. And before we shift in here to segment number 2, what have you heard from Houston country in regards to NIL spending? Because what is public from this previous season, y'all were spending the least amount or pretty close to the least amount on NIL players in the portal. But obviously when you get guys like Connor Wagman, that's going to be a little bit different. So have you heard that your NIL collective is being much more aggressive and the talent acquisition is going to show that?
It's more aggressive and you're seeing the talent turnover. I think one thing they're doing a really good job of is they're getting in the ballpark enough to get hometown discounts on kids. You mentioned Wegman and we'll talk about him in the deal in the next segment, I guess. But he is from Houston, right? Stephon Boogie Johnson is from Houston, and these guys they're finding guys like, hey, we might not get you. We're $50,000 away or whatever, but we're all in the 6 digits and we play in front of mom and dad, right? Like that I think has added a layer to it that they're in the same ballpark with. And then in their recruiting with NIL, they really have hit home run with some kids by saying, hey, come represent the city of Houston in a way that is resonating with a handful of 2026. But it's still not up there. I mean, we're in the Big 12. We're not up there with Tech or anything right now, right? So
nobody's up there with Tech at the moment. BYU might have an argument at some point in time, but they're not quite there yet. And it's funny you mentioned that, right? Oklahoma State's in a similar perspective. We have never beaten OU for all of the top in-state talent. It's never happened, right? But right now we are destroying Oklahoma when it comes to grabbing the top in-state dudes. And a large portion of it is because we're willing to be aggressive. We're willing to financially be close to the same ballpark as the Sooners. And if you win your home state or you win your home geographical area, you're always going to give yourself a chance. So, yes, let's talk about the Boogies and the Wagmans of the world here real quick. But we got to tell the fine folks out here how they can capitalize. If you're feeling good about the Cougs or the Cowboys, let's hammer the over and make some coin. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The summer sports are in full swing. And whether you're all about baseball, you're trying to chip in for par on the green or hit some high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action, right? So why not make it more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in-game updates while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach and you're cashing in with the bank account. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, so you need to do the same thing. The app keeps it fresh with daily new promotions and fun ways to bet. So whether you're placing a same-game parlay, you're watching a bet ride all the way into the ninth, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. Plus, it's super easy to use, bad A payouts, and they make the regular season feel much like postseason style of events because of the excitement factor. If you're new to FanDuel, that's pretty cool too, because new customers can bet just $5 to get $150 back in bonus bets. If your first $5 hauler is a winner, make sure that you open the FanDuel app today. Visit FanDuel.com and get started. It's hammering the over season. You know people are going to doubt the Cowboys and doubt the Cougs, so you might as well make it worth your while. Go hammer the over. Get with FanDuel today for all of your betting needs. Oh, I forgot the little FanDuel thing in the bottom. I'm gonna get in trouble. All right, bud. So let's talk about some of the dudes. Or obviously, my audience has heard me ad nauseum. For Cougar Country, real quick. Yes, the battle between Zane Flores, Haas Haney is going to be worthwhile. At the end of the day, Haas seems to be somebody that's going to be integral to packaging, whether it be short yardage, red zone scenarios. Even if he doesn't win the job, he's going to have a ton of packaging because you cannot replace that athleticism and that level of speed. From a wide receiver perspective, we don't have Boogie, right? That's going to hurt the heart a little bit, but we do have Christian Fitzpatrick from Marshall. He's the guy that seems to be grabbing the most headlines. From a running back position perspective, it's going to be more like committee. We've got Rodney Fields, Trent Hallen, Caleb Hicks, and Sesi Vailahe. They're all going to do different things, so it's not going to be like one specific dude. But the defense is going to be the calling card for this season, I feel like. And that's crazy to say. Oklahoma State's known historically for offenses. But this new Todd Grantham system is it's intense, it's physical, it's crazy. Like, we're trying to send a message, and I cannot wait. I feel a little bit bad for UT Martin, our week one opponent, because they're not going to be prepared, in my opinion, for the physicality that we're prepared to bring. But the jack linebacker position should be circled by every opposition. we've got Wendell Gregory, South Carolina transfer, and Malik Charles, who has a long NFL pedigree that's only been playing football for a few years. Those two dudes are big time. Brian McCloy, who's a 5th-round draft grade coming out of Akron. On the corners, we got J.K. Johnson from LSU. We got Jalen Davies from UCLA. It's going to be an exciting season, an exciting time. But my audience has heard me, spiel about these dudes for a hot minute. Why is Cougar Country excited? And why does people like ESPN feel like that Houston could actually be a sleeper? And I will say, you got twice now. This is 2 years in a row that you guys have been in my top 5 worst transfer losses for Oklahoma State. Obviously, Boogie and Jason Queso Brooks. But other than those fellas, who does Cowboy Country and everybody else in the Big 12 need to be prepared for in Houston?
Well, and I guess I should thank you for a couple of starters there. It sounds like Queso's had a great camp. But I will say, I want to give credit to Oklahoma State before I get too far, that y'all didn't just steal Haney from TCU. He was a legacy that lived outside of Fort Worth, and his dad played for them. His mom played sports for them as well. Mm-hmm. Impressive. I'd imagine that means he's probably got some like wink about playing a lot, but I don't know that. I guess you would know more about that.
Oh, he's going to play a lot. Even if he's not QB1, he's just way too fast and athletic to not play. Right.
Well, yeah, and his mom was a track star. I guess you point that as your mom has got the speed. Mom is always the key to this, Cody. I don't know. Like,
yeah.
I tried to tell my wife that, but anyway. No, I look at Houston's roster and I think a lot of the question marks are people like, because it's so much newness. A couple new coordinators as well. They brought in 5 offensive linemen transfer portal. Sounds like they're competing for a handful of spots, but 1 or 2 guys from last year may start as well.
Gotcha.
They brought in a whole bunch of new DBs. They did lose 2, I guess, that are worth mentioning, but a lot of newness in Houston is why people in Houston, close to the team, feel good about it, and it's why a lot of people on the outside don't know what to expect. I will say, though, if you've been 4-8 2 consecutive years, it might be time to change that up some. Right? You can't be critical of what it was like and also not like having new players, because you clearly couldn't win with the other guys, right? And so Connor Wegman is the big splash here. He committed in the transfer portal in December of 2024, like right after it opened up. And he is from Houston, Bridgeland High School. And he was a 5-star, like top 3 kid in the class coming out of high school. And it just didn't work out at A&M. He redshirted, then he got hurt. And then he got hurt again.
Because A&M's a dumpster fire, bro.
Well, that too. They had a couple coaches and multiple offensive coordinators come through. He never got settled there. And we also learned in an article by CBS Sports in March, like how hurt he was. He hurt his shoulder in the 3rd quarter of the first game of the season.
Oh, wow.
And he was just like, they're playing Notre Dame. He'd already played bad for the first half, but we now know Notre Dame was pretty good. All right. And he was like, I can't sit a season hurt again. If I don't have to have surgery, I'm going to play through this. And then he ends up like straining his bicep because he alters how he's throwing with the bad shoulder. It was all bad, right? And so he's all good to go. He's full go now, and they're hoping to have more of the guy out of high school. And if they keep him upright, again, he has been hurt twice. He's had a lower body injury his redshirt freshman year, and he had an upper body injury his second year as a starter there. But if they can keep him upright, like, they've always had receivers. You mentioned Stephon Boogie Johnson. They bring in Mekhi Muse 18 months ago. He's more of a slotty kind of guy.
Right.
They have Harvey Broussard, comes in from Louisiana. Amari Thomas was the top pass catcher 2 years in a row at South Florida. They got some really talented receivers and a tight end. And I love big guys. This guy's Tanner Kozel, 6'7". He's like listed at 250. He was at Ball State. He spent like a month or 2 at Wisconsin before deciding to come to Houston. Kozel's, his PFF stuff's off the charts. He had 94 catches as a tight end last year. He's not like the road grading blocker that you might want out of some old school offenses, but the guy can catch the ball as a big body. I'm excited about the passing offense, and it might be because we had 2 consecutive years of not throwing the ball very well. But I'm excited about where that's going. Defensively, 2 different guys from Tulane at the linebacker spots are kind of where I'm got my eyes at. Last year defense was kind of Houston's calling card. It was like they could hold teams under 16 points. They're okay. Which
you have a guy named Jesus. Like that's hard to beat.
He's one of our 2 linebackers. Jesus Machado. He comes from Tulane. And he played for Fritz at Tulane, stayed there for a year after Fritz left, and ultimately decided to join him at Houston. His linebacker teammate will be Corey Platt, who came over to Houston with Fritz initially, did tear his ACL, so he hadn't played for Houston yet. He was highly touted out of Tulane, though. When he came to Houston, people were kind of surprised. People knew he would leave Tulane. I think people were surprised he was following Fritz and not going to like LSU down the road. So we'll see how that recovery looks. Obviously, everything from camp sounds like he's all good to go. He's really so the linebacking core is new but fun. And so I'm excited about a lot of things. I will say, though, this is the most chaotic conference of college football. You can have a really good team and be 9-3 because the Big 12 happened. like you can be like that's just how it goes. And so I'm looking between 7 and 8, 9 wins, and I can on a good day talk myself into the higher end of that. But it's also, it's the first season in a long time that I feel good about Houston's non-conference schedule. They've got Stephen F. Austin to start. They have Rice. They play every year. And then their Power 4 team, they had a previously scheduled matchup with Oregon State. Well, Oregon State is not really the same Power 4 team it was a couple years back when the game was scheduled. And so suddenly it feels like that could be 3 wins. Like I feel good about that. And they only had 4 wins each of the last 2 seasons. So like suddenly we're cooking with gas, right? Right, Cody? Who'd you replace Queso with or Boogie? What you got going on in Stillwater?
Well, we got 6'6", 305-pound Bob Schick from Virginia Tech. That's going to be the guy that's going to potentially slide in there. We also were able to go get Markel Samuel, the 6'4", 305-pound offensive tackle from Appalachian State. He has the ability to slide around. We also got Grant Sigrin from Nebraska, and he's a very interesting story because he went from a defensive end to a tight end to now an offensive lineman, and he just made that transfer to O-line last year at Nebraska.
What you're telling me there is that the metabolism slowed down. He started eating. That's what.
There you go. Yes. He just kept growing and growing and growing. But you've seen it. The guys who play defensive end, tight end all throughout high school and maybe even early into college, if they continuously grow, they don't typically lose that athleticism that got them there in the first place. So that's the benefit of when you have a tight end that kind of explodes upwards muscle-wise to an offensive lineman. Dude, I think that there's a lot of similarities about the perception of Oklahoma State and Houston, which is precisely why I wanted to do this. I would admit I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up our tight end, Josh Ford. If he doesn't have a successful career as a tight end, we might be seeing him on in the UFC at some point in time. The dude eats, sleeps, and breathes the physicality of this game of football. You absolutely have to have it. I'm excited for it. And you mentioned in this bipolar Big 12 conference, you can have a good team and end up on the bad side of a record. But that is something that I think that West Virginia fans need to remember. And, ironically, before we get to that real quick, you mentioned your non-con. In the squad show, I gave you a little bit of a hard time about your non-con. Bro, I can't talk because we turn around like hours later and we announced that we're playing Lindenwood University in a couple years. I was like, oh my gosh, really? Like timing wise, not great. And if you haven't checked out the squad show, you got to go do so. But anywho, all right, buddy. So let's talk a little bit about this bipolar conference that we all know and love to some degree, because our buddies Drake and Cam, and for everybody out there, hit the subscribe button for Locked On Cougs and my show, so that way Drake can keep his job. But they discussed how West Virginia is at least being talked about in some areas as a potential front runner to make this SEC jump. I think it's ludicrous, but maybe not for the reasons that you may think. We'll hit that here in a second. All right, so congratulations-ish to West Virginia for being mentioned as one of the potential the top spots for the SEC in the next round of realignment. My thing here is, I think West Virginia fans do fit very well in the Big 12, right? I think they like being in the Big 12. I think they're appreciative that the Big 12 welcomed them in, and they seem to be that kind of university, that kind of fan base that does value loyalty, especially with everything they went through in the Big East. So I feel kind of comfortable. But that SEC paycheck, it's hard to pass up. It is what it is. So my counteraction, I guess, would be Brett Yormark. I hope that he watched the Drake and Cam stuff. I hope he's seen some of this start to permeate out at least a little bit. Because if you want to prevent this from happening, to me, You got to kill the ACC. You got to go give them traveling partners. Go get a Miami, a Pitt, a Virginia Tech. Give West Virginia a bigger incentive to not look at this, because Drake and Cam did mention they're the ninth. What was it? Was it a marketability, profitability? So they were top 10 and something, and then they were top 15 and it was wins. So they were number 9 in size of fan base. They were top 15 all time in college football and most wins, which I didn't know. So and you mentioned earlier there was some other things. So what else have you heard about this potentially being a thing for West Virginia?
Some of those all-time stats I would say are they've been around a long time too, right?
Yeah.
They're not quite Rutgers, but they've been around a long. West Virginia's other big thing for them though is they're the only big program in another state. It's not a very big state, but it's another state.
Okay.
And then while regionality, I guess they do share some with Virginia Tech or Ohio State. They do kind of have a different vibe in those regions, right? Like they just are. Yeah. And for reference, Mountaineer Paul is a great member of the team, but also a very look at Mountaineer Paul and then go check out Locked On Buckeyes and okay, that's the difference we're talking about here, right?
Burning couches in the Big 12 is perfect, right? That's perfect.
Welcome to the show.
Yes.
And I think the big thing there, though, is the SEC has its own network, and we can blame those folks in Austin for why the Big 12 doesn't, but that's a whole different episode of the podcast.
Yep.
With their own network, the SEC network, they are in the game of adding states because then they can sell that TV package to the state, and then you're paying for it every month, no matter whether you're watching or not, right? And you got to watch to get West Virginia content if you're in West Virginia. It's the same reason that Sankey mentioned he wanted to add North Carolina was because they want to add another state. Well, they chose UNC as the one potentially. I guess that's that whole story, right? But Florida State and Clemson are national enough that I think that there is conversation with those that's valid. West Virginia is odd to me because it is not a very big state as far as carrying it. That's why you talk about the region a little bit and kind of the cultural aspects of West Virginia as well. I do, and then I should say that this all stems from one of those Twitter accounts that has been right a couple times, so everyone thinks that they must know something. Gotcha. Tweeted out that apparently West Virginia has had conversations about it with SEC officials. And the conversation, I guess, stemmed from back when in 2011, when West Virginia came to the Big 12, they were getting a laundry list of reasons that the SEC said no, and they've addressed those reasons. They've fixed this facility, done this, they've done those things. And hey, let's open this conversation again. Everyone's going to be jumping around in 2030 again, right? And so that I think is where a lot of it comes from. I will say, and I'm not sure what you think about this, I almost wonder if, in a realignment perspective, if they're kind of pushing chips to the table because Yormark kind of needs them in a weird way. They're the Eastern Seaboard linchpin to me to getting Pitt, Louisville, Virginia Tech, and your pitch to them, to those schools, to leave the ACC and join the Big 12. It does feel like, hey, look, we're already in your time zone, right? I guess Central Florida is also in the time zone, but West Virginia carries an interesting weight there. And I wonder if they're just trying to get people to bid on them a little bit in a way or something. But I don't really see them as an SEC school. Do you?
No, I don't. And I think you kind of nailed it, right? Mountaineer Paul is, an embodiment of, by and large, how the West Virginia fan base is. And when they're good, Morgantown at night is very comparable, in my opinion, to Lubbock. When Texas Tech is good, if it's a night game and they're ranked, it's probably a loss. It really doesn't matter who you are.
Hard to win.
Texas
hard places to win.
You went through it. We've gone through it. If Tech is good and they're ranked and it's a night game, you're going to take a loss while getting hit in the back of the neck with batteries and tortillas and tacos and everything else that you can think of. So West Virginia does fit in the conference very well. I think their fan base would agree with that. But in this wide, wacky world that is college football now, the fans, unfortunately, don't get a ton of say in this, right? So if the administration, the powers that be, the donors, if they decide that we have to take this SEC payday, then, we could be looking at a potential problem. And I do find your argument very viable. If you are Brett Yormark, if you're ever going to look to expand and take part of the ACC, or maybe in the more legitimate part of the ACC, you do have to present West Virginia as one of the reasons, one of the options. And I think that goes both ways, right? Whenever you're trying to attract talent, you can use West Virginia as a sales pitch. And whenever you're trying to sales pitch West Virginia on why they should stay, if we're telling them, hey, we're about to have Pitt, or a Va Tech or a Miami or a Louisville. We're going to give you some more geographical partners to travel with to make life easier on you. That is the only thing that kind of alienates West Virginia. And that might be the only reason they would explore leaving, is because outside of Cincy and UCF, they don't really have any help. So they're spending more than everybody else in the conference on travel. And I think Brett Yormark needs to step up to the plate here and do something major. Did you kill the Pac-12, Brett? Kill the ACC because they're dying anyways.
Travel is largely a non-revenue sports thing, which isn't. I actually like non-revenue. I like track and field a lot. My real thing for that is that really hits those pocketbooks more, though, because those sports aren't bringing in a lot of money, right? I also think that a criminal thing that happened to West Virginia that actually you and your fan base might relate to is splitting up Pitt, West Virginia was atrocious. They should have gone to whatever conference it was together. That should have never happened like that. If you were taking one, you should take. And just like when Oklahoma and Oklahoma State split up and suddenly Bedlam was broken, right? Like that should have never happened. And I say that more because I think Oklahoma should come back, but that's a separate episode, right? I think that breaking, and like West Virginia, I'm sure as their fan base has to be saying like, hey, there's some talk that Mountaineer Paul has had about like game day it has West Virginia Pitt on the like short list of games for this year. Like they can hype that up as well. I feel like they're going to be looking to get with their buddies in the next realignment, and that could be Pitt and Louisville, and that could be Virginia Tech. That'd be someone close by in a way that the Big 12 does need to pay attention to. I don't think it's an SEC school, but I do think it's an interesting conversation. I don't think it's impossible.
See, I hadn't necessarily thought of it from that angle. That's why you're the expert. I'm just the goofy dude that screams into a microphone. But yeah, one of the very, very few things that I've always been somewhat critical on Brett Yormark about is the lack of rivalries, right? Yes, you lose Bedlam, and you lose Red River. You do gain the Holy War, but then the next biggest rivalry we have is Farmageddon. And for whatever disastrous decision reason, they're not going to play every year. So you have the Holy War, you have Farmageddon, and then you have what? I know TCU and Baylor pretend to have a rivalry to some degree, which I don't necessarily understand that either, other than the religious angle of both universities. But outside of that, like, we don't have that stuff. We don't have a premier game to put on rivalry weekend other than the Holy War. And we all know that rivalries do, in fact, drive some viewership, right? And viewership is profit. Profit is expansion. It gives you much more capabilities. And we haven't capitalized, whether it's going to be Oklahoma State versus Tech as a budding rivalry, or Kansas State versus whomever else, or Houston versus Texas Tech. There's other rivalries in the conference that we're not promoting enough. Like, if Oklahoma State Utah is ever going to be a rival, you need to make it a yearly game. Same with Oklahoma State Texas or Houston Texas Tech. And we're not doing that. I hate that. So in order to combat that, that would be a beautiful idea. Bring the backyard brawl into the Big 12, give that extra incentive for West Virginia to continue to be happy. And I think everybody wins. And that allows the SEC to lose to some degree, because they're going to do what they are going to do. And that's fine. I think Brett Yormark has been the visionary that we needed in this conference to be successful. But there has been some things that he's recommended the Big 12 do that he ended up not doing. And then the other conference just kind of stole his idea. And that I don't necessarily appreciate. Brett Yormark needs to have another capitalization moment. I think this is it. This is it. Do not give West Virginia a reason to even entertain the idea of leaving the conference. If you go get the Pitts and the Virginia Techs and Miamis of the world, I do think that will allow all West Virginia country to breathe a sigh of relief and say, okay, we're where we're supposed to be, and we're going to be here for quite some time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the biggest thing there is locking them down, because then you can kill the ACC and make it a real power 3. And suddenly you're playing, it's a little bit different game because you'd have probably more schools in the Big 12 than the SEC and Big 10, but it becomes a lot different race all of a sudden. I don't see West Virginia going to the SEC, but I do think it's opened up an interesting conversation about it, because I don't hate the idea of the SEC getting a new, like, if I'm an SEC person, adding states, taking shots at other conferences, like that all tracks and makes sense.
Well, and another thing Drake and Kim mentioned that I wasn't aware of, they have like a top 20, maybe even top 15 audience. Like, they have like 2 million something fans. I didn't know that. I had no idea.
I wonder what, I mean, obviously they're very passionate. You can tell that when you mention like going to Morgantown for a game, but
Right.
I'm trying to figure out where exactly, because again, it's not a very big state.
Right.
I know they got
Yeah.
alumni of their states just like everyone does, but it was an interesting thing that I hadn't really thought of. And then when they said, like, I go, no way, and they're Googleably right.
Right. Yes.
Like that tracks, and so I was a little surprised, but
Yep. Yeah, they have a lot of things going in their favor, and I think it is collectively good for the Big 12 to have some of this parity. Now, eventually, right, at some point in time in the next 6-7 years, I think there does need to be a flag bearer, right? But in the interim, the fact that number 16 can beat number 1, number 2 can be 15, and on any given weekend, which is actually ironic. Have you seen that Any Given Saturday SEC thing on Netflix?
no.
I mean, in the transfer portal era, it's kind of cool, right? So I saw J.K. Johnson, who's now at Oklahoma State. He's in the show. Wendell Gregory from South Carolina is now. So seeing some of the SEC guys that have transferred into Stillwater from that angle, it is kind of cool. But, dude, in the first few minutes, they begin this thing with Any Given Saturday in the SEC. Anybody can beat anybody and anything can happen. I was like, what? That is absolutely preposterous. When is anybody ever talking about Mississippi State knocking off Georgia or even Ole Miss, consistently beating somebody like in Alabama? It doesn't happen. Like, the only time in recent memory I can think of that the David versus Goliath thing actually came to fruition was Vandy beating Alabama this previous season. But outside of that, it is very, very, very rare that any team from the bottom half of the SEC is even in a competitive ball game with the top 4 SEC teams. It's a ridiculous notion to pretend that the SEC is this league where every Saturday anybody can beat anybody. I was like, when did Netflix get involved in this SEC propaganda? Yeah, I almost said a bad word. See, Parker,
but I know that you'll feel the same way about Austin as I do. To me, though, if anyone could beat anyone over there, UT and Oklahoma wouldn't have gone. Like, part of the thought process was like, let's go find some of these Mississippi States, the Kentuckys.
Yeah.
Like, let's go find some of those dogs. And
from a scheduling perspective, yeah, it's very visible that the SEC is like, you know what? We're going to help someone and screw someone. Let's help the Horns. And honestly, I never thought there would be a day in my life that I said I kind of felt bad for OU, but that draw from a scheduling perspective, like you mentioned OU coming back to the conference, I would love it. I would absolutely love it, partially because we won 2 of the last 3, also because we're absolutely bending them over the coals right now and then treating them like a redheaded stepchild when it comes to in-state recruiting. But realistically speaking, man, there are tons of things I could say about Austin and UT, but none of which are appropriate for me to keep my job. So I'm going to refrain from that. Anywho, man, this has been a blast. Thank you very, very much for coming on, helping us kind of break down some of the nuances between the old school Houston teams that a lot of people are familiar with and assuming still exist. From that area, I hope both of our teams have a big season. Again, the parity is what we can sell right now. So if you have 2 teams that are projected 12, 13, 14, 15-ish range in the preseason polls, to have these 2 teams finish up towards the top would be great. To see Jason Queso-Brooks and Boogie do some miraculous things, also going to be great. So if you're coming to Stillwater for the Houston game, make sure you hit me up and we'll find a way to make some fun out of the deal. But anywho, everybody go check out Locked On Cougs, because Parker is the consummate professional while I'm just the goofy dude who yells in front of a microphone. But make sure that while we're at it, hit that subscribe button so Drake can keep his job. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen on both of these channels. All right, y'all. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave a review. Oh, and go ahead and hit the like button if you liked it, because that's manageable as well. All right, y'all. Go Cowboys. Go Cougs. We'll be locking them up here pretty soon. All right, buddy.